Welcome to Jim Cantelon Today. I'm Jim Cantelon. Always a joy to have you here, friends. Take a deep breath now because this show is just going to rush through. 30 minutes gone like 30 seconds. First of all, Mike Vole comes my way. It's our Pastors Week, listening to pastors talking about ministry. He's been in the ministry for 20 years, though he's a very young guy, pastoring a church in Edmonton, Alberta. And he'll be giving us his perspective on pastoring in the 21st century. I'll also be briefly interviewing Greg Musselman from Voice of the Martyrs, and today he's going to be telling me about Eritrea. So let's get right to it. Hang on, here we go. Off the top of the show, I introduced the fact I'd be talking to a young pastor by the name of Michael Vole. Some of you might recall several weeks ago, I had Mike on the show talking about his book, Sideswiped, 3 Keys to a Fresh Start After Suffering a Broken Heart, and the tragic story of the loss of his wife, Sherry, back in 2001 in a car accident. But today, Michael, I want to talk about pastoring. You've been a pastor now for almost 20 years, right?
Yeah, I have.
Hard to believe, huh?
It is crazy. Actually, you were the first one that took a chance on me.
Oh, I know. I was going to take credit for it, but now that you mention it, I had the prescience, the wisdom, the insight to hire Michael to be our youth pastor at Broadway Church in Vancouver years ago.
There are some that maybe are wishing that you wouldn't have done that.
Let's not go there. That would be a long rabbit hole. Michael, you're not even 40 yet, and you've been pastoring almost 20 years. You're associate pastor at a terrific church in Edmonton called Northport Community Church, working there with some marvelous people. Church has changed, though, has it not?
It has.
Even in the course of the 20 years?
Yeah.
Tell me about how it has changed and some of the values and perspectives and worldviews and all those kind of things that are now very much more 21st century than 20th century.
Sure. You know, when I first started pastoring, there was this sense, you're the pastor, and when you go in, don't share too much of yourself. You're the big man on campus, and people are going to listen to you because of your position and the title that you hold. And really, that's not the case at all anymore. And I'm so thankful for that and glad for that. Now people want to know that you care for them. That you actually care about them before they'll listen to anything that you have to say. And so while it used to be that, the role pastor or reverend, it carried with it some weight. Now it doesn't hold any water.
Would you say it's lack of respect?
I don't think it's lack of respect so much as it is just even a lack of knowledge. That they don't even understand the importance of, reverend or pastor, even what you do. Because we are in such a post-Christian culture that people have no understanding. For example, often people who are coming to North Point, we are in a wonderful brand new area. We've got houses popping up all around us. And our slogan is "Come as you are." And people do. They come as they are and they invite their friends. We've got a real invite culture. And so many of them who are going through, say, a divorce or separation or something has exploded in their lives, you end up meeting with them. And what's interesting is the kind of conversations that will end up happening in my office. If my walls could speak, it would make for some really good TV. But they don't filter. Even the people who are talking to me, it used to be that they would filter because I'm a pastor. Yeah. Now they'll tell me anything with any kind of language, and I think that in some ways it's a beautiful thing because they're just sharing their heart, and rather than skirt around the issues, they actually go right for the heart. And I think that it's a beautiful privilege now that although it's different, that I still get to minister and in some ways really get to minister to what the heart issues are.
But you are saying that a big shift in the last 20 years has been from the positional to the relational.
Absolutely, no question at all.
You've got a church that's got almost 3,000 people in its orbit. How do you even begin to demonstrate to these precious people that you care for them?
One of the things that we have tried to model as much as we can is availability. Now, of course, with an orbit of 3,000, you can only be available so much. But I think that part of it is even just, what are you dressed like? Are you open even in the foyers? Will you talk to people? Or are you kind of the person that's in the back, waiting to go on the stage? Are you mingling amongst people? When they call you, will you take the call? Will you answer an email? And so I'm finding in the context of North Point that we must be very pastoral. Like it's more pastoral than any other position that I've been in. It's hands-on, getting your hands dirty, rolling up your sleeves in the issues that are at hand with them. Yeah.
What do you? You've got a lot of young people attending your church. Mm-hmm. What are your expectations with regard to young people coming to the church vis-a-vis their world awareness, mm-hmm. their sexuality, their material values, their relationship with their parents and with each other, the time they're spending texting, on computer games? I mean, it's such a distracted world that young people are growing up in right mm-hmm. now without many moral anchors. Mm-hmm. How do you even begin to appear to be relevant, as a spiritual leader to kids coming from that kind of a background?
Well, I think you have to speak into their felt needs first of all. For example, one of the ways, and I'll come back to that. One of the ways that we do felt needs well at North Point is we take a look at our community. What is going on? What are some of the things that are issues and needs of them, and we want to meet them where they are. So whether that's me working with rainbows of children and parents who are going through a death or divorce, or whether it's divorce care or grief share or single and parenting, all issues that are very important in our sphere and orbit, that there's a lot of brokenness in families, that you've got to meet them right there. And they know that if you're meeting them in those places, that they know that all of a sudden there's trust there, that you care about them, you care about their situation, and then you can begin to speak into some of the larger needs, because there is a huge chasm between where we would see ourselves and what our values are as followers of Jesus Christ, wanting to follow what the Word of God says for our lives, and where the people that we're ministering to, where they are at. And so first we've got to build that bridge relationally, and then we've got to do our very utmost to make sure that we can speak into that. But it takes time. It takes time. But I'm finding that whether it be students or young adults, that they're open. They want truth. They don't want you to just tickle their ears. They want you to tell them what you really believe. They've heard enough political slogans. Yeah. They've heard enough dancing around the issues. They really want you to cut to the chase. And I believe that after trust has been established, then you can cut to the chase in love. You can do that, and they want that.
So they want to hear a gospel that costs something, that's calling them to discipleship, to self-discipline, to dreaming a big dream, to going the second mile, something that's going to bring the best out of them.
Absolutely, I believe so. I mean, if you look at young people today, they will sign up for causes. I mean, they're on change.org and they're casting their vote, and they care about issues. And I think that's why at times many of them have left the church, because they thought, well, what is the church doing? Or there are a lot of other good organizations that are doing great things, and so I don't even know why I need the church. And what I want to do is I want to show people that Jesus Christ makes a difference. He makes a difference in my life, and he can make a difference in theirs. And he wants to make a difference that not only makes you a good person on a Sunday, but that makes you a world changer, and that gives you that message to go into the world.
So when you stand up either on the pulpit or you're over a coffee with some of these people from your community, give me a précis. How do you present Jesus to them in this 21st century world? Where do you start?
Yeah. I remember one conversation that I had with a woman, and we were playing on the same baseball team, she and her fiance, and afterwards we were having wings, and she got to quizzing me down, and you could tell that she had a real bone to pick with me, because she said, Mike, what's the difference between Jesus and Christianity and all of the other religions that are out there? And in a gentle way, I just said, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. And I follow his teachings. I think, first of all, just by even saying that people generally recognize that Jesus had some good things to say. He was a great moral teacher. So I usually start there. And then I just say, because I'm a follower of Jesus, I follow everything that he says. And he said that he is the way, the truth, and the life, and that no one comes to the Father except through him. And I said, those are hard things to hear. Yeah. It's hard for me to say that to my next door neighbor who's Buddhist, or it's hard to say, to someone who is Muslim. But the bottom line is that's what Jesus says. And if I'm going to be his follower, then I need to take that at face value. And I think when you actually say that in just the way that I just explained to you, that they're less prone to have their gloves up and ready to punch you as they are to say, wow, you actually stand behind your convictions, that if you are a follower of Jesus, you want to follow his teachings. And then it opened up a wonderful discussion, beyond that. Gave her a lot to think of. And in fact, I ended up doing their wedding. Really? They invited me to do that. So again, just was able to celebrate with them. And now they've got a growing family. And I want to continue to have influence. But as soon as we slam the door and we become, so preachy to them or defensive, all of a sudden that door gets closed, and then I don't get to be at the wedding, and I don't get to celebrate the births of their children. I don't get to do life with them. And I think that that's so very important in a transformative gospel for the 21st century.
So you're a young pastor, you're cutting the mustard, as my grandfather used to say, really doing a great job, in other words. What do you do when you just want to kick back and have fun?
Well, one of the things that I've really come to enjoy is I love working out. Because I've got a desk job, I'm sitting a lot of the time.
So you work out with weights?
I work out with weights, and so I usually do that about 5 days a week.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Are you a touch compulsive?
Perhaps. Doesn't always show, but it's something I love to do. And the other thing I really love doing is reading. I love to read all sorts of genres. Yeah. Even spy novels. Anything that can just.
And what do you and Melissa do together when you want to have fun?
We really enjoy going for walks. We enjoy playing some sports. Yeah. And she's a lot better at sports than I am.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
No, she's a good athlete.
Wow.
She's a good athlete.
Well, the long walks always works. Any Lonely Hearts column that I read, girls or guys for that matter, saying what they want to do. I love long walks. I asked Kathy about that one time. She said the thing about a long walk is undivided attention.
It's true. Leave your cell phone at home, right?
Leave your cell phone at home. Michael Voll, author of Sideswiped, which we featured a few weeks ago, 3 Keys to a Fresh Start After Suffering a Broken Heart. Young pastor, thanks for coming our way.
Thank you.
Back with more, friends, after this.
Very few African mothers ever see a doctor or midwife, yet each mother knows how fragile her child's life is. You see, 26,000 children under the age of 5 will die today because they don't have access to medical care. Your gift of $260, just $22 every month, helps stock a mobile clinic and train healthcare workers to care for young mothers and their children during pregnancy and preschool years. Join WOW Mother Care now. Protect the life of a mother and her child.
Craig Musselman back with me from Voice of the Martyrs. He's VP with that marvelous organization, concerning themselves with persecuted Christians around the world, raising awareness here in Canada, ministering to these people wherever they may be, sometimes in far-flung parts of the world, something as far-flung as Eritrea, Greg. Most Canadians have no idea where that is.
No, and Jim, it's one of the most beautiful countries in the world. It had the Italian, culture mixed in there. It used to be a part of Ethiopia.
Like it was a colony of Italy at one point, right?
Well, they weren't officially colonized. That's one thing the Ethiopians and Eritreans will say, that, of all the African countries.
Oh, that's true.
We were not really, but in terms of influence, and if you drive around Ethiopia, Eritrea, they've got all these beautiful roads that were built by the Italians.
And great Italian restaurants.
Yeah, great Italian restaurants.
But the story in Eritrea is a complicated one. There's been ongoing conflict. There's refugees there. You've been there. You've seen it. What would you say is the situation for the church in Eritrea today?
Well, it kind of goes back to May 2002 when the government called all the evangelical pastors together. They had a meeting. And as rumors have it, and I've got friends from Eritrea and Canada, and then also in the country and in refugee camps in Ethiopia, confirming these things, that the Orthodox Church put a lot of pressure on the government, to stop the spread of what they said is, evangelical Christianity because it's hooked with America. And even saying that, there were CIA spies. In fact, when we went in there in 2004, and then we did some reporting and, had it on the internet and different interviews we're doing, we were called CIA spies. And the evangelical church is kind of, again, these are ridiculous things, but this is what is told to the people. So the evangelical church is there to spy on the government, to destabilize the government, and there's this great paranoia. But it all really goes down to the fact that the church has spread. There was a church in Asmara, the capital city, full gospel church, more than 10,000 people. So the gospel was spreading all over the country, and as a result of that, the Orthodox leaders were getting uncomfortable and put pressure on. Now, interesting, when they shut the churches down, said, now you have to register. And since that time, there's only just been 1 or 2 churches have been registered.
Now, I would assume that a lot of the evangelical activity is Eritrean to Eritrean, right? A lot of these are Eritrean pastors.
Sure.
Why would they make an association between an American cultural phenomenon, as they see evangelicalism, and an Eritrean pastor? He's not white.
No, he's not white, but he is seen as being now, kind of on the side of the Americans.
So he's sold out.
Yeah, and that's the challenge that evangelical Christians have all over the world, and maybe we need to try to find other ways to describe ourselves, but it's seen as, Bible believers, but it's seen and linked into America. So it's different than the Orthodox Church. And again, people can say, well, the Muslims in their country, it's all Islam. Well, that also happens in countries that are predominantly Catholic or predominantly Orthodox, like it is in Eritrea. And so you had the churches being closed down, and then the believers continued to meet in homes. And as a result, thousands were arrested, put in shipping containers, military prisons, tortured. Some have now left the country, and a couple of the pastors that we met in 2004, even to this day, are in prison because of their faith.
Shipping containers?
Shipping containers, yeah. In horrible conditions, as you can imagine, especially in the in the hotter parts of the country.
How does this impact the everyday Eritrean believer?
Well, again, it's not always easy to get information out, but when we were there, and this was, a couple years in, and then as we've talked to those, since then that have come out, is the church is still growing. They can't meet publicly, and I remember asking one of the pastors, Holly Neiske is his name, and he's got family actually in Edmonton. And I said, did you know that the church was going to be closed down? He said, no, we didn't know it, but we started to get a vision to start meeting in our homes. So they shut the buildings down, and the believers then started to meet in their homes, and the government got wise to that and then began arresting the believers in their homes and even at evangelical weddings.
Well, and the early church was all home meetings, wasn't it?
Absolutely. There's something, and I think this, Jim, is that the more pressure that's put on the church, it will produce one of two things. It'll either produce people going, hey, I want nothing to do with this Christianity, or it causes them to be stronger. And so we see that, as the persecution has come, as long as the persecution is happening as a result of evangelism, it's, I know we'll talk in future programs about the Middle East, but, many of the historic Christians were attacked, and they go, why is this happening? Whereas the evangelicals, because they know the Bible, and not saying that others, in the historic churches don't, but they understand that when you spread the gospel, there's going to be a kickback, and persecution is what usually happens.
Greg Musselman from Voice of the Martyrs. Much more to come over the course of the year. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Back with more after this.
This is a Voice of the Martyrs Canada news update, a special report.
What began with anti-government protests escalated into a full-scale civil war involving the brutal tactics of Islamic State jihadist militants. More than 200,000 Syrians have lost their lives in 4+ years of armed conflict. About a quarter of them were Christians. In spite of all they've had to go through, Karima says their faith in Jesus hasn't wavered.
God is with us wherever we go.
Tens of thousands of Christians have died in the war since 2011. Despite the dangers, the Voice of the Martyrs Canada has been able to help persecuted Christians in Syria, providing food, supplies, Bibles, and prayer.
For more information, visit www.vomcanada.com.
John 13, verse 16, which is a kind of a summary of what we read and discussed last session. Very truly I tell you, Jesus is speaking here, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you'll be blessed if you do them. End of life lesson, basically, is what he's saying there. Now, what's he referring to? He's referring to this very unusual episode where he washed the disciples' feet. Now, keep in mind, he'd not done this before. To our knowledge, with all four of the records of Jesus' life, this was definitely novel. And it was a profound statement that Jesus was making. He was modeling for them, as I said last time, that you're not just a leader, you're not just a teacher, you're also a servant, and you will do the very lowliest task to see that the kingdom of heaven is extended. You know, I'm a preacher's kid, and I grew up with this kind of model. My father was a pastor. His father was a pastor. In fact, in my family history, we've all been pastors, missionaries, church planters, and Christian leaders since 1913. So it's quite a tradition. I'm sort of born and bred to the ministry. But I remember with my dad, he pastored very small churches in central Saskatchewan. We were in two towns, Calvington and Star City. Then we moved to Sudbury, Ontario, where Dad pastored not once but twice over the course of several years. But I think of Calvington, for instance. We lived in an uninsulated parsonage. It had a dirt basement. Water used to come in to the level of about 3.5 feet in the springtime. I used to float around in a basket, in a tub in that water. I thought it was great. I had a little board I used for a paddle. Loved my life, floating around the basement of this very humble parsonage in Calvington, Saskatchewan. Dad was paid well below the poverty line, and yet he didn't complain. I never heard him complain once. And I remember, no kidding, occasions when there was no food in the house. I remember praying at the table, not thanking God for what he provided, but just thanking him for what he would provide. There's a whole story there I'd love to tell you sometime, but it would take more than the time allotted for this teaching segment. Nevertheless, I never saw Dad complain. He would fix things at the church. He would go out and do work for some of the farmers in his congregations just to make a little extra money to make ends meet. He drove old beat-up cars that were never working properly. I remember in the cold of winter in Saskatchewan, Dad would light a fire under the oil pan of the car just to warm the oil so that when he tried to start it, it would actually turn over. I remember that. I mean, you talk about danger. The whole car could have gone up in flames. Didn't complain. I remember he would clean the church, and my little brother and I would, when we were old enough, would go over to the church every Saturday morning and help him do the cleaning. We had a pot-bellied stove in the middle of that uninsulated church in Calvington, and he would stoke it with wood and get it burning all night so that it would kind of warm the church up a bit and melt some of the ice on the windows. And then he would keep it stoked during the course of the Sunday morning service and then the Sunday night service as well. And he was the one whose fingers would get all bruised and black from dealing with ash and coal and wood and getting slivers. I remember in Star City, he was shoveling coal into a kind of a coal furnace. One time he slipped and fell on the ice leading down to the coal room and nearly broke his back. Never heard him complain. What my dad modeled for me was this thing that Jesus is talking about here. Servanthood. My dad was a big, strong, powerful guy. In any gathering, he was the biggest and the strongest of anyone there. He was a specimen, he really was. 6'2.5", 220 pounds, strong as an ox. A man among men, standing tall and good looking. He would always be the first to serve. He was not obsequious. He didn't have low self-esteem. He was not looking for approval. He didn't need approval. He was as confident as could be in himself. But he was seeking to serve. And I would say, you know, in my own experience, that the greatest model, other than Jesus in the Word, that I have ever seen of servanthood is my dad. And maybe some of you have had models like that in your life. This is what Jesus is talking about. He says, no servant is greater than his master. And he says, if I, your master, will humble myself and stoop down to your feet and clean your dirty feet and wipe them dry with a towel. That's about as low as anybody can go. If I will do that, then you will do that too. Because no servant is greater than his master. And I, your master, have become your servant, and you will become the servants of one another too. It's one of the profound lessons of Christian ethics, of the Christian worldview, and it's part of what has made Christianity so sustainable and given it such historic shelf life.
This is a Voice of the Martyrs Canada news update, a special report.
More than 200,000 Syrians have lost their lives in 4+ years of armed conflict. About a quarter of them were Christians. Prior to the uprising and then the war, there were about 3 million Christians in the country. About half of them have left, and most of the rest want to leave as well.
It breaks my heart to see what is happening to my nation with all the terrorism and the violence among the people.
If you would have come to Syria before, you would have seen how it was full of churches and beautiful Christian places, and now it's all gone. It's all destroyed.
Amani was encouraged by the concern and support of the Voice of the Martyrs Canada, but is pleading with Christians everywhere to continue to pray.
For more information, visit www.vomcanada.com.
Friends, if JCT is adding value to your life, we need you to add value to JCT. It's a quid pro quo, it really is. We're like PBS in the US. This is television that is brought to you by viewers like you. Without your help, I mean, as much fun as we're having here, we're just not going to have much shelf life, to be frank. I need 1,000 people to support us with $30 a month. I don't know how many Starbucks coffees that is in a month, but it's not a lot. But it's not a big deal. But for us, it's a huge deal. The critical mass of 1,000, providing $30 a month, means that we can stay on the air with a very, very cost-effective production. Believe me, cost-effective is the operative word. But we want to keep coming your way, and we want you to be a part of it. And we're happy we're adding value. We're happy that there's so many people watching this program already. So would you please do that? You can just, follow the links on jimcantelontoday.com and get to the point where you can support the show. Thank you for doing that. And I'll be back with more tomorrow. Bye for now.
Contact us. Jim Cantelon Today, P.O. Box 989, Burlington, Ontario, L7R 3Y7. If you're sending a check, make it payable to Jim Cantelon Today. Or visit us online at jimcantelontoday.com and click Support.